The Age of Religious Wars, the 30 Years' War, Part 2. So far, Ferdinand II had gained the most from the war. The spread of war into northern Germany enabled him to eject many of the Protestant princes and to redistribute their territories among his family and friends. By 1626, Ferdinand envisioned what was once inconceivable: the transformation of the Holy Roman Empire into an absolute Catholic Habsburg state. Obviously, Ferdinand's war aims were not compatible with his biggest ally, Maximilian of Bavaria. The emperor needed a more compliant instrument than the Bavarian army. This situation explains his curious partnership with Albrecht von Wallenstein, a mercenary general of incredible brilliance. He was also extremely mysterious, greedy, and cruel. Everyone feared and distrusted this man. In 1625, he contracted to field an imperial army at his own expense and was authorized by Ferdinand to obtain food and shelter for his massive army from the unfortunate areas in which he occupied. For a while, Wallenstein cooperated with Bavarian Field Marshal Tilly, but he eventually preferred to campaign independently. He chased Ernst von Mansfeld out of the empire, occupied much of Denmark and much of Pomerania, the German Baltic coast. By 1628, he commanded an army of 125,000. For his victories, Ferdinand gave him the title of Duke of Mecklenburg, one of the states in Pomerania. States like Brandenburg, who remained neutral at the beginning of the war, were powerless to stop him from occupying their territory. Eventually, Maximilian of Bavaria saw what Ferdinand was doing, utilizing Wallenstein to conquer all of the Holy Roman Empire, and he actually pleaded with Ferdinand to dismiss Wallenstein. Ferdinand was not about to stop. However, he was at the zenith of his power. In 1629, Ferdinand issued the Edict of Restitution, easily his fullest expression of absolute authority. Unilaterally, the edict outlawed Calvinism within the empire, and required the Lutherans to return all former Catholic property. Not only were the Protestant princes enraged by this, but the Catholic princes felt almost as menaced. The emperor was trampling on their individual liberties and taking power from them. Wallenstein kept up his march of conquest, forcibly converting much of Protestant Germany to Catholicism. There seemed to be no reason why Ferdinand could not have accomplished his goal. It was at this crucial moment in 1630 that Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden entered the war. He announced he was coming to preserve German Protestantism, but it was obvious he wanted in on the spoils of war. Gustavus was initially, like Christian IV, without German allies. Luckily for Gustavus, however, Ferdinand was already digging his own grave. Ferdinand had underestimated the growing hostility of all German princes against him. When he realized this, he tried to placate them by dismissing Wallenstein from command. All this did was remove his best general. Then Gustavus has his best stroke of luck. The French government, led by Cardinal Richelieu, agreed to subsidize Gustavus's invasion. Obviously, a French Catholic has no interest in German Protestantism. Rather, he wanted to harass the Habsburgs. With France on board, Brandenburg and Saxony finally steps up, and in 1631, Gustavus Adolphus smashed Tilly's imperial army at the Battle of Brightonfield. This was easily the most decisive battle of the 30 Years' War, for it wiped out most of the Catholic gains in a single stroke. Gustavus moves quickly south and sacks Bavaria with special thoroughness. Gustavus was on the doorstep of invading Habsburg Austria itself when Wallenstein was called out of retirement. It's here that the greatest commanders of the war met in November of 1632 at the Battle of Lutzen in Saxony. The armies fought savagely. Gustavus Adolphus himself led constant charges directly into Wallenstein's army. After several hours, however, his horse galloped back to the back lines riderless. When the Swedes saw this, they went berserk and drove Wallenstein from the battlefield. In the darkness after the battle, they finally found Gustavus's bullet-ridden body. With him gone, however, the war became a hopeless deadlock. After Lutzen, Wallenstein begins to negotiate with all sides. By this time, however, no one, not even his own men, trusted him, and in 1634 he was assassinated by one of his own captains. For the moment, Ferdinand II didn't miss Wallenstein. The imperial forces decimated the Swedes at Nordlichten, and he had made peace with Saxony and Brandenburg. Yet the war was far from over. France, in 1635, pours their army into the conflict to compensate for the Swedish losses. The combatants were now France and Sweden versus Spain and Austria. It had really become a Habsburg Bourbon dynastic conflict. The final 13 years of the war were the most destructive. Troops on both sides expended far more energy looting Germany rather than fighting. The exposed peasantry had no defense, agricultural collapse triggered famine, and the stories of cannibalism and population loss are horrifying. The German cities lost one-third of their population and the rural areas two-fifths. The empire had 8 million fewer inhabitants in 1648 than it did in 1618. Not until World War I could any other European conflict boast of such butchery. Peace was finally made in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. It turned out to be a continuation of Augsburg. The Holy Roman Empire remained a 300-state mess. Thus, the Habsburg goal of a single absolute state was dashed, this time permanently. Ius Reglo was kept, this time adding Calvinism. Almost all of the major combatants gained something. France annexed Alsace and Lorraine. Sweden got western Pomerania. Bavaria kept part of the Palatinate and their seats as an elector. Brandenburg even did well, considering their passive role in the conflict, getting eastern Pomerania. Palatinate, shockingly, is reestablished, and an eighth elector seat is established. Finally, the recognition of the Swiss Confederation and the Dutch Republic was made official.